The 1980s were a decade where style reigned supreme and neon was everywhere. Most homes had a cable TV, and MTV and Nickelodeon were both born. Young urban professionals, or yuppies, replaced the socially conscious hippie of the previous generation, and people were driven by material things. The United States continued to grow and change. The cost of living was increasing during the 1980s. A new house at the beginning of the decade cost $68,714 compared to $120,000 at the end of the decade. A new car went from about $7,201 to $15,350. A movie ticket cost $2.25 in 1980 and rose to $3.99 in 1989. Gas prices, however, dropped during the decade, going from $1.19 per gallon in 1980 and falling to 97 cents in 1989. Humble ISD was also growing. In 1980, district enrollment was 11,625 students, and it grew to 18,835 by the end of 1989. 7 new campuses, including Green Tree Elementary, Timbers Elementary, Creekwood Middle School, Atascocita Middle School, Deerwood Elementary, Pine Forest Elementary, and Willow Creek Elementary were all opened in the 1980s. The school board approved a 14% raise for teachers, bringing the starting salary to $11,490. On May 17, 1983, the district's football stadium on Wilson Road was officially named as George E. Turner Stadium. And in July of 1984, Deerbrook Mall was opened in Humble. In 1980, Ronald Reagan, a former actor and California governor, was elected as the 40th U.S. president. Reagan was dubbed the Great Communicator and served 2 terms as president. He cut taxes, increased defense spending, negotiated a nuclear arms reduction agreement with the Soviets, and is credited with helping to bring a quicker end to the Cold War. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens in Washington state became the largest and most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history. In 1980, the United States led a boycott of the Summer Olympic Games in Moscow to protest the late 1979 Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor became the first female Supreme Court justice. In 1983, Sally Ride became the first American woman in space. In 1983, Motorola introduced the very first mobile phones to the United States. In 1987, disposable contact lenses were first sold. In 1988, George H.W. Bush defeated Democratic rival Michael Dukakis to win the White House. While in office, President Bush launched successful military operations against Panama and Iraq. However, his popularity at home was marred by an economic recession, and he only served 1 term. In 1989, the Berlin Wall was torn down at the end of the Cold War. And finally, in 1989, the Nintendo Game Boy, a portable video game system, was released. The 1980s are often remembered for materialism and consumerism. It is a decade that saw the rise of the yuppie and an explosion of blockbuster movies and the emergence of cable networks like MTV, which introduced the music video and launched the careers of many iconic artists. It is also the decade when many of our ESE teachers were growing up. Stay tuned for one more special video. Will you find your teacher?